Hey, Andy Mort here, and in this episode of the Gentle Rebel podcast, I want to explore our relationship with not knowing. We had this question, how do you tend to respond when you do not know, in our community journal circle a couple of weeks ago. And it feels like one that sits at the core of many issues in our world right now. How do we hold not knowing? How do we conceal it when we do not know? Where do we turn for knowledge? And what do we do with it when we acquire it? I want to start by showing an advert. I've seen this a lot lately for some reason, but there's something about it that really gets me.
This place is bigger than I thought.
So we've only got 1 hour. Could you plan us a tour?
I see you're at the Liam Museum. Shall we focus on traditional Korean art?
Well, we are in Korea, so let's do it. This book, isn't it fascinating?
That's not a book. It's a roof tile, often found on the houses of the rich and noble.
I'm still not completely sure why this irritates me as much as it does. I think it might be that the couple depicted in it seem so disinterested and disconnected from their environment, from where they are, from what they're doing. You know, why are they there? And why do they not really have any idea what is there and any interest in what is there? They didn't know the museum was big. They had only given themselves an hour to look around it. And he thinks a roof tile is a book. And even when his phone corrects him, they sort of just skip off giggling without listening to the correct information that this tool on his phone is giving them.
That's not a book. It's a roof tile, often found on the houses of the rich and noble.
There's a billboard by the AI company Turing that seems to say the quiet part out loud when it comes to this vision that many of these tools are promoting. It says, we teach AGI to think, reason and code, so you don't have to. It's that so you don't have to is very telling. Does this encourage us to outsource our thinking and reasoning to artificial intelligence, not to support or to deepen or to strengthen our cognitive abilities and pursuits as humans, but to replace them? There's both a disregard for the sacred delight of human consciousness, thought processes and creativity, and a seeming quest to eliminate mystery, curiosity, and learning that comes from not knowing. And not knowing has always been an important part of exploring our potential as human beings. It's the driving force of creativity, of innovation, of deeper connection to the worlds within, around, and between us.
We're about to witness the greatest miracle of the machine age.
The Gentle Rebel Podcast.
I'm so glad you could come. This is going to be such an exciting day. I hope you enjoy it. I think you will.
So how do you tend to respond when you do not know? What do you think of when you hear that question? As people shared how they got on with the question in the journal circle, there were differences in personal experiences, in the things that people focused on, which is always great. It's one of the things I love about those sessions each week. But there was also an identifiable thread around a kind of openness versus closedness, which I want to explore and unpack a little bit in this episode. So being closed off in the not knowing can be defensive, it can be protective, it can be secretive. And being open to not knowing is, in a sense, curious. It's relational. It's exploratory. We're going to look at particular ways not knowing may appear in life and notice this difference between the openness and the closedness that might occur. And also think about how they feel for us as well. Maybe closed not knowing has a physical tightness to it, a clenching, a grasping, a covering up, rushing to paint over the threat of embarrassment of being found out. Maybe open not knowing feels physically expansive. It feels deeper. It feels more spacious, where the uncertainty is met with an invitation into possibility and curiosity, rather than clinging, grasping, and defensiveness. So the first potential response that we have to not knowing is pretending to know. Have you ever been in a situation where you've pretended to know something that you don't know? It happens for all sorts of reasons. It might be a passive situation where maybe there's something that appears everybody else knows and it doesn't feel like a particular risk to nod along and avoid drawing attention to the fact that you have no idea what they're talking about. There are environments where it might feel too risky to be curious, to be uncertain, to be confused, to admit that you don't know something. In 2007, researchers recorded the questions asked by children aged 14 months to 5 years and found that they asked an average of 107 questions per hour, which is pretty full on, yeah, but an indication of the curiosity of the mind of a child. This was then built on later by research led by Susan Engel in American schools, who observed that the youngest children in a suburban elementary school setting asked between 2 and 5 questions in a 2-hour period. And as they got older, they asked fewer and fewer, with most giving up in these observations altogether by 10 or 11 years old. And she described being in a particular lesson where a 9th grader raised her hand to ask if there were any places in the world where no one made art. A very interesting question. And the teacher stopped her mid-sentence with, "Zoe, no questions now, please. It's time for learning." This is, of course, absurd. And it's also, impossible to maintain a classroom of 30 kids all asking 107 questions an hour. I make 3,210 questions in a 60-minute lesson altogether across all the kids, or 2,408 questions in a 45-minute lesson. I may well have got my maths wrong there, but you get the point. Within institutional settings, our natural curiosity and creativity can get left behind, by nature of those settings, by nature of the fact that the way that they need to be managed. And if questions are deemed as disruptive or inappropriate, we may simply pretend to know. We may struggle quietly. We may just be like, okay, I don't know, but I'm going to hope that nobody notices that I don't know. And this is especially true for many more kind of introverted and sensitive people who are already generally disposed to slot in around others without drawing much attention our way. And so this is to say, like, for a child, not knowing never really feels like a problem. It's underpinned by almost a kind of electricity, a buzz of connection where everything's new and mysterious and waiting to be explored. And people are fountains of knowledge. People are opportunities to learn about these things as well. But then as we grow up, as we become an adult, moving through kind of more rigid institutionalized systems, not knowing starts to feel like an exposing story, something that is risky to admit, and something that we may start to tie our sense of worth as human beings to. These are the things that we are going to be assessed against. So we've got to pretend to know. And so in this sense, pretending to know may simply be an adaptive way to keep the peace. But there are other ways that we might respond to not knowing by pretending to know as well. There's the annoying way that AI does it, where it gives you wrong information because it's programmed to give an answer. And within a sense of certainty. And so it pretends it is correct without acknowledging there are gaps in its ability to predict the results that give you an accurate response. And this reflects the kind of, closed pretending that intends to create a perception of knowledge so that those listening believe that the source's confidence equates to competence. And while this sometimes does come from a nefarious place, where there's a desire to deliberately mislead and maybe even profit from somebody else's trust, from somebody else believing what you're saying, it can also stem from defenses that we might pick up through life and roles that we might adopt and play as we kind of find our place within social situations. There are stories that we absorb that connect knowledge and knowing to self-worth and value. It might feel unsafe to not know because that form of intelligence is used to measure and judge your sense of belonging in a particular context. Or you might have come to adopt the role of the person that others come to for answers about anything and everything. And so subtly you're integrating the story that says, I must know in order to be useful, and I must be useful in order to be accepted. And even if this starts as a kind of healthy or even humorous thing, where it's like, ask Andy, he'll know. That never happens. It can become a burden if there is nothing to free you from that story, whether it's a case of simply letting go yourself or others in your social circles providing evidence that your knowledge is not what they value about you. It's not the reason that you are part of that relationship, and that you are valuable as a person beyond that, not simply as an instrument. We talked about this in the Journal Circle session, and how freeing it is for those who have been in that position to allow themselves to say, do you know what? I no longer need to know. The door then opens to a relationship with knowledge that says, I can get to know things because I enjoy learning, because I'm curious, because I like to share the weird and wonderful things that I discover about the world. It brings me joy to share knowledge with people. I'm also free to say, I don't know, and maybe I'd love to find out. Let me get back to you. Or simply, I don't know, and I don't really care. Which takes us on to the next response. We might respond to not knowing by saying, as we just mentioned, I don't know. Which is weird. It's an option. But again, there are contrasting ways to express this. When it comes from that open place, it creates space to explore within our unknowing. An open don't know admits not knowing with hands turned towards potential learning and discovery. It might come from an inner spark and a freedom from performance. It's like, I don't know the answer to this, but I really am fascinated to find out. Or I don't have any idea how this works, but I kind of want to know. A closed I don't know can shut the door to the pathway of discovery. It might use I don't know as a way to communicate I don't care, which may be a healthy boundary. You know, I refuse to be dragged into a game, or I don't have any interest in this, and I'm not going to spend my finite time on Earth trying to work it out or whatever, if it's not important. Or it may be a defense. You know, I refuse to see that a different path is possible. I don't know. And it can be frustrating, can't it, to spend time with someone who says, I don't know, in this closed way, especially if it's how they respond to every question or idea. And so it becomes less of a, ooh, I don't know, and more of a, I don't know. And it could be the exasperated cry of, I don't know, from the parent responding to the child asking their 84th question of this hour, or an indifferent shrug from the co-worker who just says it to shut down a conversation. Another context we might experience not knowing is within the realm of being in the know. So there's this type of knowing about maybe it's other people's business or trends, fads, the latest news. Being in the know is its own kind of knowledge. They say that ignorance is bliss. When is that the case? For some people, ignorance is torment because it signals that they're left out or left behind. When from closedness, being in the know may not be so much about helping others as being in control and even centering oneself in the business of things, in the business of other people. An openness of being in the know is at the heart of those people who naturally connect people together, ideas together. Being in the know allows them to create links, make introductions, set conditions for collaborative potentials. They don't need to be in the centre of it themselves, but they have a handle on the moving parts and can catalyse possibilities by smushing them together. Another type of knowledge is knowing what is best. You know, we are pattern-seeking creatures. We use cognitive maps to structure our understanding of a complex world. We also use stories to connect and relate our experiences with situations others might be in. And when we face ambiguous or uncertain situations, a closed, unknowing mindset can lead to doubling down on certainty. And in this sense, when this uncertainty feels kind of overstimulating, overwhelming, certainty can feel like solid ground, even if it's manufactured, even if it's kind of brittle. It might look like control over other people with doctrines, demands, dogmatic rules that profess to know what is in their best interests. Closeness says this is how it is, and it refuses to listen. It refuses nuance, and it punishes curiosity and even accountability as disrespectful or insolent or rude. Openness, on the other hand, embraces the wisdom of experience and the well-worn tracks of tradition as a pathway to use as we explore the depths of being. It sits shoulder to shoulder as a mentor who acknowledges the uniqueness of the other person's situation while offering stories from their own experience that may be applicable. They may resonate, they may relate. Again, there's an openness to saying, I don't know the best thing to do here, but then reorienting toward how a decision is made rather than getting caught up in the decision itself, the what of the decision. It's like, let's make the best decision with the information that we have. And we discussed how being immersed in a closed, dogmatic culture like this can make saying, I don't know, a truly kind of radical act. It's powerful to admit that you don't know when you've spent your life swimming in a tradition, for example, that treats it as a weakness or something to be almost existentially afraid of. We need to have answers to everything. We need to close off all the potential open loops. To say, I don't know, no one knows, or we cannot know, given the current state of empirical evidence that supports a concrete answer. To say, I don't know, rather than clambering and clutching at straws, this is a more powerful and freeing position to enjoy. And then there's knowing that we don't know. In a 1933 essay lamenting the rise of the Nazi movement in Germany, Bertrand Russell wrote, "The fundamental cause of the trouble is that in the modern world, the stupid are cocksure while the intelligent are full of doubt." Charles Bukowski said something similar when giving advice to budding writers. He said, but the problem is that bad writers tend to have the self-confidence, while the good ones tend to have self-doubt. And what this all speaks to is knowing what we do not know and knowing how to respond when we do not know what we do not know. Our journal circle finished on a similar note to this. We talked about the Dunning-Kruger effect, which this very much relates to. If you've not come across that, it's that sort of fallacy of knowledge based on the fact that we don't yet know what we don't know about something. And this kind of leads us to maybe speak with confidence about topics that we think we know because we know enough to believe that we know, but we don't know what we don't know at this point. Maybe you can think of people that this applies to. I couldn't possibly dare comment. The place I want to finish this episode is the response to not knowing that says, I do not know, but I know where to look if I want to figure it out. And so this is part of what we do in the Return to Serenity Island course, which I've talked about over the recent weeks. It's built around seeing life through the lens of maps. When we use maps, we can become part of this process, not so much of knowing, but of reading where we are and how we want to navigate the territory that the map represents. And the map is representing the territory of life. So we're sort of mapping aspects of life onto this, thinking about them as different areas of an island, which allows us to kind of integrate our relationship with not knowing into part of the landscapes of the world that we inhabit. Not knowing can be a door to connection, to curiosity, to creativity, and to boundaries as well. And it can also feel disorienting. It can feel confusing. It can feel alienating and lonely if we feel like we're alone in our not knowing. But maps can help this disorientation become a kind of orientation in progress without strict instructions or kind of trying to force ourselves onto someone else's path, following what somebody else would do. And taking our own judgment and our own desires out of it. They can bring us home to ourselves. We can see where we are located within that territory. As we were talking about earlier, there's a freedom in allowing ourselves to let go of the need to know all the time. Maybe the need to know is coming from somebody else, luring us into their game or trying to derail us in some way or trip us up by judging us for not knowing what it is that they deem the most important thing to know. Or perhaps we can just let go of it because it's not interesting to us. And so we spend time marking out territories based on what it is that matters to us personally, the people, the projects, the pursuits that we want to choose to give our finite resources to. And when there seems to be an infinite number of entities vying for our attention and care and energy, it's really important to maybe just pause and think about this stuff. By mapping the territory of our lives in ways that speak to who we are and how we want to grow, given the limited time and inner resources that we have, we can say, I don't know, in a whole spectrum of ways, from the indifferent to the creatively curious, we can filter those opportunities and invitations more quickly when we have a map to follow. And this way, maybe if we're not interested in going to that museum, we don't end up there in the first place. We're currently in a cluster of live picnic sessions in the Return to Serenity Island, which is basically where I open up a Zoom meeting for 30 minutes each week. I share a sound anchor reflection that I've created for it, along with some reflection questions that we spend a few minutes responding to and then reflecting on together afterwards. There's a chance to meet others, ask questions, talk about how you're getting on with the course materials if you're sort of working on them at this stage, or you can just come along quietly. You can absorb the calming energy. You don't have to get actively involved in the sessions. And the sessions are completely optional as well. So they're not part of the course itself, but they're sort of optional extras for anybody that wants that sense of connection. So I will post a link to last week's Sound Anchor, which was about sort of moving in and out of landscapes and how that relates to our lives, seeing the bigger picture and then moving in to smaller actions that we take in everyday life. I guess it kind of gives you an experience of what goes on. It's far easier doing that than to try and describe it. There'll be a link in the show notes for that. And you can join us at serenityisland.me and choose your own price for a year of access to the materials and to future live sessions that we will do in clusters through the year. I know many people are navigating changing financial circumstances at the moment, and as I've said before, I truly mean it when I say choose the amount that feels right for you. There is no minimum. There's no need to explain or justify your choice. I honestly just want you to be there if you feel the pull as I'm describing it. All right, I'm going to leave it there for this episode of the Gentle Rebel podcast. Until next time, remember, you're an artist. The world needs your art. Now go and make somebody's day. Bye-bye.
So shines a good deed in a weary world.